Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Stone Age. This was sent to me by Z-Man Games and is designed by Bernd Braunhofer. In Stone Age, players are sent back to the Stone Age. With tools quite archaic at first, you'll be able to collect wood, stone, and gold. These resources will allow you to attain higher levels of knowledge and build sturdier roofs over your head. Though luck plays an important part in the game, only those who master their fate will be able to grasp victory. Finally, one mustn't forget to feed their tribe, as that would represent a major setback for them. Relive history, carve your victory in stone. Stone Age, a fascinating adventure in the past. Let me show you how to play. So in Stone Age, you are trying to get the most victory points. You are cavemen trying to get food and resources to get points. How the round goes is each round is 3 phases, one after the other. In the first phase, you place your little figures on the board to do actions. Then you take the actions after everyone's been done placing. Then you feed your tribe. The first player would go, okay. So if you look around the board, you can see these circles. These circles represent places where your figures could go. And so one by one, each player is going to take a turn placing figures. So player 1 might put a figure here. Player 2 might put a figure here. This one requires 2 figures. I'll explain why in a second, and so on. And you're just placing figures around the board. Now, you may not pass if you have figures to place. You can never place figures on a location where you already have figures. For example, let's say red player put 2 figures here. On a future turn, he could not put more figures there. So, how many figures can go in each one? Usually it's pretty simple. It's just marked by the circlles. A hunting ground here can have an infinite number of figures. And then all of the material locations can carry up to 7 figures each. Meanwhile, the civilization cards each have a circle, and the building tiles have a circle. So again, those can each occupy 1 worker. So you take turns placing your figures on I'm not going to put all the figures right now, but I am going to go over what the actions do. Because once everyone is done placing all their figures, then you go around and you take the actions that correspond to them. So on your turn, you can choose the order. But let's just go into what all these action spaces do. And so the first one is the tool maker. You can acquire new tool tiles. If you don't have a tool tile, you take a number 1 tool tile and you place it on your player board. If you ever fill up your board with all number 1 tool tiles, you may then, when you do an upgrade, turn the top one to a 2. And once these fill up to 2s, then on your future upgrade, you can change this to a 3 and so on. So yeah, you can upgrade your tools, which these are important because you can use them to manipulate dice totals for gathering resources or food. Whenever you use a tool, you tap it 90 degrees to show it's been used for that round. And I'll get into that a little bit later. The hut, or the fuck hut, as I like to call it, is how you get more figures. You start the game with, I believe, 6 figures, or is it 5? 5 figures each. And in order to get 5, or to get the other ones, because each player has 5 in their reserves, you got to put 2 workers here. Then you get a child that you can then use for future labor. And that's how you get more figures. If you go to the field, that can increase your agricultural level. So this track here is your food or your agriculture track. So a red player could bump theirs up to 1. And what that means is they receive free food at the end of the round. In this case, 1 piece of food. Now, a lot of the spaces are affected by dice rolls. And it depends on how many figures you placed there. So let's say blue player put 2 figures in the hunting ground. That means he can take 2 dice, because there's 2 workers, and he rolls them. So he rolled 2. Now, what you do for food is you divide it by 2. So in this case, he would get 1 food, 2 divided by 2. And you would put that in his reserve. The more workers you place, though, if he had placed 4 workers, he could roll 4 dice. Oh, and actually, I'm not showing you, you get this cool cup you can roll the dice in for extra fun. In this case, he rolled a 15. Rounded down, that's going to be 7 food then. And it's the exact same thing for all the resources, except each resource you divide by a different number. So if you look here, these tell you the number you divide them by. So for red player, if red player had 3 workers in the forest, they take 3 dice and they roll them. And that's going to be 14 divided by 3. That's going to give you 4 wood, rounded. And you do the same thing for all the other resources. For brick, you divide by 4, stone by 5, and gold by 6. So each one is a little bit harder to get. Now, civilization cards, these, if you have a worker on one of these cards, you can pay the number of resources shown here. Food is not a resource, and you can acquire the card. So for this one, if I pay 1 resource, I get this reward. This gives you a tool. In this case, it's a free upgrade. And at the end of the game, this item here is used for scoring, which I'll explain the scoring later. But yeah, each card is worth more food, not food, resources. This one will give you 5 food if you get it. This one will give you 3 points. This one will give you 2 resources of your choice. Once you take the card, you take it off, and then later these will be slid over at the end of the round and refresh with new cards. And finally, we have the building sites, where if you have a figure on one of these, you can pay the resources and get points. So if I pay 2 brick and a gold, you take the tile, you get 14 points. Some of them are a little bit different. Like for example, this one, you can pay as many resources as you want, 1 to 7, and you'll get the number of points added to what you paid for. So if you pay more resources, you get more points. And then this one, you have to pay exactly 5 resources of 1 type to get that one. And depending on what you pay with, you get more points. So those are the actions. Again, on your turn, you just go through and do them one by one in any order. Now, once everyone's done with all their actions, then you go to the feeding phase. And for each figure you own, you have to pay a food. So if I have 6 workers, I got to pay a food. Now, red player, their agriculture track is up 1, meaning they get a free food, meaning they get to have 1 less figure to worry about each round. If you would ever have not enough food to feed your figures, you have to pay everything you can. 1 resource equals 1 food, so you can use resources to exchange. But if you're still not able to feed everybody, you lose 10 points. And you can go into negative scores if you're not careful. Once you feed everybody, you slide these over to the right and fill up the slots, and you just do a new round. Now, the game ends when either there aren't enough civilization cards to fill the 4 spaces, or one of these building stacks is empty. In that case, in the first case, the game ends immediately. In the second case, you play the round to completion, including feeding your tribe. Now, at the end of the game, there are some special scoring conditions. For example, these icons, the ones with the green backgrounds on the bottom, these are different sort of like technologies, sort of, where if you collect sets of these, of unique icons, you can score more points. So if I had 1, 2, let's say 3, you score 3 times 3, which would be 9 points. If you had 5 different ones, it would be 25 points, and so on. Other types of scoring include something like this, where these are tool makers. So you count how many tool makers are on your cards, and then you multiply it by the total value of your tools at the end of the game. Speaking of tools, let's go into how these work. So remember how you could roll your dice and get resources and food. These can be tapped to change your dice rolls. So for the food roll, let's say I roll 4 dice and I got 10. Well, in that case, it'd be fine. But let's say I wanted 1 more food. I could tap this one and make it 12. So in that case, I would get 6 food instead of 5. And again, these can be very useful for increasing your odds for more resources. There are other types of scoring as well, like how many of these farmers you have multiplied by your agriculture track number at the end. I'm not going to go into all these, but yeah, it's kind of about either collecting different items for the green-backed cards, or collecting multiple workers for different scoring at the end. So at the end of the game, you score how many points everyone scored from their cards and throughout the game. Each remaining resource is worth a point. and whoever has the most is the winner. And that's pretty much it. Just go around collecting resources, getting points, and getting tools and getting food. And that's the game.
Now, I've been on record saying that I didn't care for this game, which I've turned around a bit on it. Like, I think it's fun. I just think it's very simple. And I mean, to be fair, this is an older game, and back when worker placement games, I think, weren't nearly as prevalent. I think this was, pretty refreshing. But nowadays, there are a lot of better worker placement games. However, I still think it's fun. I just think that after a couple plays, it's pretty clear, I think, what you need to do to win, and the decisions become easier and easier for me over time, but, that's not necessarily the fault of the game, as it is just sort of time has moved on and we've gotten improvements upon this game. Aesthetically, the game, I like it. I like the cup. I like the little details like the fuck hut and the whole idea of using tools. It's a cute aesthetic. I will say, if you really struggle with math, this one could be a little bit trickier for some to grasp. I think it's a fun idea to kind of put more workers on to maximize your chances of more stuff, and it does feel really good to tap your tools and get big loads of stuff. But for people who are bad with math, having to constantly add the dice and divide and round can be frustrating for people. Like, I'm fine with it, but I've noticed that for some people it can be a little bit fiddly. It kind of sucks if you just roll your dice and get a dog shit roll. Like, this game has, like it says on the box, a good amount of luck involved. So it really is about mitigating it, right? Like, okay, how many workers do I need to put on this space to make sure I get what I need? At least maximize the odds of getting what I need, and using those potentially the tools to help you even further. Now, I think this game is a great introduction to worker placement, though, because there are not that many locations to choose from. A lot of them are just roll dice, get stuff, and then you just trade those in for points. Very simple to grasp. And once you grasp those basics, the most interesting aspect of the game for me is actually the card scoring, where you're trying to get the cards that work best for you and trying to make sure other people don't get those cards if they're also like high on agriculture or like tool values. You're like, oh, I gotta get that first before this person. That to me is the meat of the game. For newcomers, it's gonna be like getting stuff and trading in points. But once you've got that down, the cards are really, I think, what make it more interesting. It's got that sort of Seven Wonders feel with the green-backed cards of collecting sets. I think collecting sets is always fun, so, that's pretty solid. So overall, it's solid. Like, it's fun. If you're a seasoned worker placement game player, it's going to feel very plain, though. But if that's something you're looking for, like a quicker game, stripped down to the basics of just get stuff, trade it in, get little improvements, bam. This is still, it's a good time. Do I think it's top 100 on BoardGameGeek worthy? I don't think so. But as a game, it's still fun. It's just very simple for those who are maybe used to more meatier games, but not necessarily a bad thing.